Why does gun control matter for you as someone who wants to be prepared for any kind of an emergency situation? We know in 2021 that gun control is going to be a huge topic that's going to be pushed upon all of us. And it's one of those threats out there that's going to affect our individual rights more so than just about anything else that could be put on the docket at this point. So let's talk about why gun control matters for preppers and why a firearms ban throughout the country could lead to some sort of conflict. Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today we're talking about gun control and prepping, why it should matter to you as a prepper, why we should all be concerned about the direction things are heading in the sense of where we're going legislatively in the world of gun control. Look, we know the new administration is hell-bent on making sure that they can limit your Second Amendment rights. And we also know that the gun control measures being put out there don't work to actually provide anybody any additional safety. They just make some people feel good about doing something. And that's not how we should ever make any kind of a logical decision now, is it? So preppers are people who want to be self-sustainable. They want to be people who are self-reliant, and you want to be people who are able to be protected in case of an emergency scenario. And the Second Amendment allows for a lot of those things to possibly exist, rather than just having to succumb to the will of those who are in power or have the ability to do it for you. And that's one of the issues that we have here in the prepping community when it comes to gun control. The more of it there is, the less freedom and the less access we have, and that makes us less prepared. It is an issue you need to be concerned about. And we also know that there are things out there that could create some kind of an additional conflict or be at least a catalyst of a conflict because of the way our political vitriol has gone over the last few years. Things have definitely gotten a little bit more heightened in the sense of tension. And I know I'm preparing for anything that could possibly happen here in the near future, and gun control is definitely something that I'm very concerned about. So if you're concerned about it as well, then hit the subscribe button below, because these are things that we're going to keep talking about. Yes, this channel has a lot of firearms content on it, but that's because it's one of the things that I'm passionate about. And when it comes to infringing on the Second Amendment, I'm also very passionate about that not being able to happen. So let's stay on top of it and keep talking about it together. The White House put out a statement just the other day, basically saying they want Congress to enact common sense gun reform laws that are going to help protect everybody in the country. We all know that never works the way they advertise it, but that's what they're trying to do. And the things they've kind of narrowed their list down to now give us an idea of exactly what they're coming for. So universal background checks is something they keep throwing out there as a thing that just sounds good to some people who have no idea about what they're talking about. Then you move on from there and it goes directly to the banning of military style looking rifles. I don't like to call them assault weapons because we know that that's not a legitimate definition of what it is that most Americans own when it comes to semi-automatic sporting rifles, but that's their verbiage that they're using to try to sell the arguments. And high capacity magazines is another one that they like to throw out there, but what they're really talking about is actually standard capacity magazines, because they don't really want anything over 10 rounds. And I'm sorry, but your average AK-47 or AR-15 comes standard with a 30 round magazine. So they're trying to get rid of basic functionality of firearms, things that are just limited to civilian ownership right now, and make them even harder to acquire. Then the next thing is that they want to get rid of immunity for gun manufacturers and make them take on liability for anything that might occur when one of their products is used inappropriately. And that, of course, sets a terrible precedent for any company, of any manufacturer, and any product that's out there, based on the fact that there's no reason that can't just bleed onto another type of company or another type of product here in the future. There's a lot of things out there that can cause accidental death. There's a lot of things that people can use out there in a terrible manner and in a horrible way, but none of those things are going to be affected the same way as firearms, at least in the beginning. And then we'll see where all that trickles down to. So terrible precedent set there. And those are the three main ones they listed in their recent statement from the White House that they're going after. They want Congress to make those things happen. So listen, if this is your first time, I can understand why you have a feeling of, well, you know, you guys talking about these things and telling people to buy magazines and telling people to get ammo and telling people to get parts and everything else is what's causing all the panic buying, and that's the big issue here. Well, if you haven't lived in a place like New York or California, where on a regular basis you're going through the gambit of wondering what you own is either legal or illegal, or if you're going to become a felon overnight, or if you're going to have access to those items the next day, depending on how a vote is swung, That is a life that those people live right now, and it's not something you're used to. So in your mind, all the panic buying is not justified because you probably haven't lived through it yet. But if you've been in California or New York or somewhere where there's draconian style gun control laws, you know that the second one of those laws passes, magazines disappear or become extremely expensive. Parts disappear. All the firearms that are either affected by it disappear, or the firearms that aren't affected by it that still have functionality disappear and become even more expensive. So what we're trying to do when we get the word out is just saying, hey, this is something you should take a look at now in case any of this starts to move forward. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, they're not going to do it to me, I'm not going to comply, and that's not going to happen here. I totally understand that, and honestly, it's the same feeling that I share with you. However, we can see that in states like California, where there's millions and millions of gun owners, those people either don't get out and vote, so they don't change exactly what's happening to them, or they're not willing to actually take on the brunt of the law to say we're not going to comply, so all those people eventually comply, or they obviously hide in the shadows. Either way, this is still a possibility. So I just wanted to mention that if you haven't lived in a state that restricts those things yet, and you're not really sure how all that feels when you don't know if day to day you're going to become a felon or not, that's why the panic buying is there. It's not about panic, it's about strategy. It's about getting ahead of that whole situation so you don't have to spend as much money or lose as much time searching or possibly lose out on the ability to even own a certain product or a certain type of firearm just based on whatever laws are going to be drafted up. Okay? So, moving from there, how could a firearms ban start a conflict? What could really happen in the sense of gun control that could cause some kind of an SHTF event here in the future and really kind of turn the screws on everything that's happening in the country right now? Well, just keep in mind, okay? So, lots of us in the Second Amendment community are very passionate about not losing our rights, and we're very passionate about not allowing some kind of tyrannical government to come seize our property. And understand that back in the Revolutionary War, at least in the lead up to it, the British decided that confiscation of small arms and munitions, especially in the sense of gunpowder, was necessary for them to have a strategic advantage over the Americans so that if there was any kind of a rebellion, they were able to squash it. And that's a lot of what pushed the American Revolution into a hot war, because those Americans decided that they weren't going to give up their right to be able to defend themselves and to be able to have a say in how they are treated and how they're governed. And honestly, there was battles in the American Revolution that were lost by the Americans that were probably only lost because of their lack of munitions due to what the British were able to accomplish before the war really turned the tide. So understand that the precedent has been set in the past for gun confiscation to actually finally be that catalyst that the people needed to say enough is enough, and that the tyrannical entity at the time, the Redcoats, decided that that was the place they really needed to get control over in order to have a strategic advantage and possibly win a war if need be against these colonists. So understand, history has already shown us that this could be a possibility. And with the political vitriol and the way things have been over the last few years, including this past 1 year where everybody is basically done with what the government is trying to do and say, and nobody's listening to orders anymore because we all have seen what the fallout of it has been, there's a good chance that if things push too far, people are going to not react in a pleasant way. So as preppers, this is why this is important. It's about access. It's about decisions and options when it comes to how you're going to defend yourself and how you're going to defend your family and how you're going to be better prepared in an emergency. It's about not wanting to live under a tyrannical rule, because as preppers, we want self-reliance, we want self-sufficiency, and we want to live in peace and in privacy with freedom. It's about not becoming a criminal overnight just because you own something that at one point was legal. And it's also about the fact that enough of this kind of push in the sense of gun control can eventually lead to something more devastating in the sense of a catalyst towards conflict. These are things we need to watch out for. And when the White House puts out statements where they're specifically saying, like, we really want to do this, this is something that really needs to happen, it makes me say, well, I'm just going to build another AR, I guess, because, that's what we do now. So do what you can now. Get your magazines, get your parts, start building more. Look, these parts aren't as cheap as they used to be. This is Palmetto State Armory stuff right here. Look, I'm cool with that, but it's definitely more expensive than I used to have to spend. Either way, You put out a statement saying that this gun control agenda is your #1 priority. I put out a statement and I say, well, I'm going to build another one. So you guys do what you got to do. But I wanted to bring this to your attention. Make sure that you have a plan for how you're going to react to what these things could possibly transpire into. And understand that if you're not from one of those states who already lives under these crazy laws that don't really make any sense and have no logic behind them, it's hard for you to maybe grasp the concept of why people freak out when these things start to happen. But I lived in California for 10 years, and I can tell you that every year you didn't know if you were just going to be stripped down to a single shot rifle or if you were going to have to just bury everything. No one knows. Okay, look, and that's just how it is in those states. But here we are. Do what you can. Keep ahead of it. Keep watching out for all these bills that are being putting out there on the floor in the Congress, and keep in mind that there is still checks and balances, so we could find ourselves doing okay in the sense of not having super crazy draconian gun control laws pass. But at the same time, we should prepare for those to actually be a reality. So if you have anything else to leave about all the gun control that's happening, and we know this administration's pushing it, leave it in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts. Let me know how you're preparing for these things to occur. And if you have anything else at all for me, always leave it in the comments. Let me know if there's something I can help you out with. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.